All right, we're live. So we got Matt Collins with us again. I was just saying, you know what? Why don't we just record and talk and see where this goes? It's going to be a fast hour, as I imagine. But you sent me this video, and it was with the chakras and the pyramid, and it was like mind blowing. But my favorite thing to do is to read the YouTube comments after, and some of them are hilarious, right? Like this one guy's like, that video just taught me everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that too.
Yeah, so, no, kind of. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No. Please go ahead.
That particular video kind of undresses everything you thought you knew about history and ancient history and about physics and everything else, and then it kind of suggests you need to start over, right? But yeah, so to give your audience an idea of what we're talking about, I sent you a link to a video, I think from Alexander Waugh's YouTube channel. I don't know whose the voice is. There's some voiceover artist sort of reading the script.
And it's intense music too. You're like, what is happening here?
Yeah, it is.
Like doomsday level music, but it's
funny.
That's not the message though, right?
Well, the music might be composed by Alan Green, who is a musical composer and sort of in league with these guys, Waugh and Robert Grant. This other guy, Robert Grant. And that's the reason I sent you this thing, because the dude who discovered this stuff was Robert Grant. And I thought, oh, how funny that, there's two guys named Robert Grant, and you should know about the other one.
I'm the lesser form, because you're talking about there's two very different forms.
Right. Or we could call you the younger, Robert Grant, the younger.
Okay. He's still with us though.
No, he's alive. Robert Grant. He's associated with the Resonance Academy, which is like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Nassim Haramein. They're kind of like this alternative science sort of. It can kind of easily get lumped with New Age, and maybe they would even call themselves New Agey. But in this sense, all New Age means, I think, from my estimate, is reconsidering all of the sort of disciplinary categories of specialty that the university system is based on, and sort of really embracing
eclecticism.
It's eclectic. Well, it's eclectic not for the sake of being eclectic, but for the kinds of formal patterns that you can find emerging when you start to look across all of the fields.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the video that I sent is it focuses on Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, that famous drawing.
Yeah, with the
man in the circle and the square. It's squaring the circles. It's sort of the old hermetic kind of exercise that one does to sort of reconcile the difference between spirit and matter. It's the geometric idea of that. And
I'm so glad I have you explaining this, because
you're like chakras. It's like, yeah. And so like we'll get to that in a second. But what Robert Grant observed in studying that drawing by Da Vinci is that it sort of has this cryptographic sort of encoded messages in it that relate to not only the relationship of the diameter of the Earth and the diameter of the Moon, but also relate to the geometry of all of the sides of the pyramids and their angular relationships, and then also sort of building on the myth of Osiris from the Egyptian
his body chopped up
cosmology. That's right, exactly. So Osiris's body was chopped into 14 parts, and 14 or 15, and his wife Isis tried to put them all back together and couldn't find the phallus, and it's this sort of this ancient enigmatic story. But apparently, so there's 14 parts of the body that you are clearly delineated, meaning there's a line drawn on them the way that Da Vinci drew them. And what Robert Grant noticed was that each of these lines corresponds to, if you took a section like through the center of the pyramid, the pyramid of Giza,
Yeah.
then each of the different chambers are located there, right?
Yeah.
And so
to cut the pyramid in half, it
right.
would be a sectional of these same cutout pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And so they relate to them, and so then what's implied is that there are chambers that have yet to be discovered in there that correspond to things that Da Vinci somehow knew, right? And then so what he's doing there is he's relating back to Alan Green's work, and Alan Green did work looking at Shakespeare's sonnets and the cover page of the sonnets, and you've probably seen them before, but it's sort of just like it says the sonnets above it. There's a graphic band.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's like two lines, and then underneath that it says like 4G.ELD by TT, which is Thomas Thorpe, which we mentioned in our last video as being like the publisher of Shakespeare. And what Alan Green does, he notices that if you connect the dots, literally, like the periods, and you go along the angle of the dominant T and all these things, that it creates a circle, and the circle crosses at the endpoints of the lines, and that following Thales' theorem, which is that across any diameter of a circle, if you connect any point along that, you'll get a right angle, right? Mm-hmm. Do you see that idea?
Yeah.
So across any diagonal, when you draw any point between those things, you get right-angled triangles, and that the right-angled triangles that are delineated by the dots and the crossings on that all relate to the universal constants. So the idea is that whoever drew the cover sheet of the sonnets knew these universal constants, some of which had not been sort of discovered until the 18th and 19th centuries, and 20th centuries even. And still, some of them we don't know the meaning of. We don't know the application of, right? Like we understand. Right. So like it's all this stuff that suggests this ancient knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so then, where the chakra comes into it, that you were talking about, is that in, I guess, I don't know if each of the crossings on the Vitruvian Man relate to a particular chakra, but the idea of the chakra is, it sounds woo-woo and whatnot, but to translate the Eastern idea of the chakra into Western physiology is rather simply understood as the idea that the organs of the body operate in electric circuits with one another.
Okay.
So there's a hierarchy of circuits going up the top, and each of the circuits is regulated, or each of the organ pairs is regulated by a gland. So there's 7 glands. And, in the New Age druggy world, we talk about the pineal gland and its calcification and everything, and how that's the antenna that you connect to the universe with and all that. And so this is the idea of the alignment of the circuits. The idea, let's see. So the idea of Kundalini, right, is that you have this spinal energy going up and down, and the trick to sort of awakening is to allow that energy to flow, so it's not getting stuck. And so the idea is that you would have stuck memories or stuck chi or something from one chakra to the next, from one circuit, from one gland going up to the next. And when you unblock that stuff, then that's when you sort of have some awakening and some universal awareness of yourself and all of that good stuff. So the video comes to the conclusion of saying, was Da Vinci in tune with some ancient knowledge that inspired the building of the pyramids? And can we discover through the exploration of the pyramids, the further exploration of the pyramids, discover something about ourselves and humanity and blah, 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 blah. And so you get to be mistaken for Robert Grant, who does all that cool stuff if you want.
Well, man, I was watching that, and I'm not going to lie, maybe I'm easily convinced or something, but I think most people with an open mind, they can kind of be easily convinced. But anyways, when I was watching this, I was like, whoa, like these connections, either this is pure coincidence or like freak coincidence, or there's something here. And if so, what is that thing that is lining all of this up? Like, does that mean that it's all by design, or it's all, like I say, a freak coincidence? Because I see it only as 2 options. But I'm probably wrong, but everything.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an understandable sort of conclusion, especially, epistemologically. If you don't know what you don't know, then you're kind of like, must be like, well, it has to be either or.
Mm-hmm.
The great either or that I love is that if you look into crop circles and you sort of look into the people who have studied crop circles and look at the science of it, you can see it clearly when someone's faked a crop circle and they've gone with boards and they've bent the grass. But if you see one of the authentic crop circles, you can see that where the grasses are bent, they're sort of bent uniformly, and it's almost like they're heat bent or something. They don't exhibit breaking. And,
okay, so when have one of these happened? Because I'll be honest, Matt, I am a huge skeptic when it comes to crop circles. Like
totally. No, and so let me just say that the people that study these have observed, like, they're definitely like seemingly authentic crop circles. They show up in the middle of the night. Some people caught them on video and they just kind of arrive, right? Spontaneously. And so here's the either or that screws with you.
Okay.
One of the options is that intelligence agencies have some kind of crazy energy instrument that allows them to perform this thing, implying a human conspiracy. So you have to either accept on one side the possibility of a vast human conspiracy that is kept secret and that enables the manipulation of matter in such a way that common people and popular science does not reckon with. Or there's aliens doing it. Right? Like, which is it?
When did this happen?
When did what happen?
Well, this one that they were bent in this way that's created this.
Oh, no. I'm saying like in the history of crop circles, you can see the definite hoaxes where people have gone and tried to make.
When have there ever been like a non-hoax? Like one?
Almost all of them
are non-hoaxes.
Yeah.
Where it looks like they've been bent by like a laser machine or something.
No, I'm just saying that there's a uniformity to the bending, to the directionality that you can't get by walking with a board on your feet and bending the grass over. Like, it's very clearly the difference between an electromagnetic process, like in material planing, like when they use like arc blast in order to get a uniform surface, right? You can tell that by the uniformity of the surface.
We're talking about a laser here, like something that's
laser's one particular narrow kind of electromagnetic plasma energy manipulation instruments. It's just one thing. Not all electromagnetic stuff is laser. But anyway, so getting back to your idea of like, is this coincidence? Like, what is it? What does it mean? And also gullibility. And there's something to be said for, being open-minded to the point of being gullible, right?
Wow.
Or like, where's the limit, right? Because you don't want to prevent the opportunity of learning or of challenging your own received wisdom. But you also don't want to be an easy mark, right? You want to be discerning and say, right? And so it's, if you're hell-bent on certainty and you need to know it, right? If certainty is your thing, and then there's going to be very little at all that you can learn or that you can know. But if you're open with uncertainty, right? 100%. Yeah. So
because the way so many people look at the world is cause and effect.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is my default, but ultimately there are things that we just can never know. And I started this thread the other day on Facebook. I asked this question, what happens after we die? Like, I sincerely want to know everyone's answers. And the answers are so incredibly varied. It ranges from nothing, which something happens, you die, right? Anyways, nothing to a myriad religious, but it's so cool to see that. And it makes you wonder, like, really, what does happen after this?
Yeah.
And ultimately that might be the others. Well, sorry, last bit. That might be the other stages of these chakras.
Okay. Yeah. The other stages of the chakras. Say more about that.
Well, because it was saying that there's still these rooms to be discovered.
Okay. Yes.
And then when it showed you it showed you all the different chakras, and we know the names of the chakras. I believe.
There's
but the uncovering of the wisdom from those things, those chakras.
Right. So each of the chakras has a name, as the Buddhists and the Hindus, sort of the old tradition from the East sort of acknowledges each of these things. But we can, I mean, it's kind of simple, right? There's a root chakra, which is your waste and and where your colon empties out, right? And then the second one is where your reproductive organs are. And then your third one is your belly, where your ancient worm is, right? So your consumption organ, your stomach, where right? And then you move up, and it's the sacral, which is sort of like the kind of the belly button or sternum, and then you have your heart chakra, and then your throat chakra, and then your third eye, and then your crown chakra. And so you can think about
excellent. I could not have reproduced that myself.
Just a little practice, you will eventually. But so each of these is like the different aspects of consciousness, right? And if you think about our self-identity as consumers, how does that translate? That translates into your stomach chakra. You're just creating waste. You're processing stuff and turning it to waste. That's like what we do in our culture. And so like in a collective consciousness sort of way, there's hypothetically some kind of progress to be made, or to regressed from, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can get periods in history where you have a sort of awakening, hypothetically. Jung talks a lot about the progress of civilizations. And so in terms of, like, I guess, the transcendence of the stages of the chakras, the idea is that we can collectively come to new awareness. We can open our third eye and discover the interiority of our minds, or the idea of the crown chakra being that it opens us. Think about the crown in terms of the Earth's aurora borealis, right? Like that is a crown around.
You're exiting your.
It's energy coming in or energy going out, depending on right.
Right.
And so that
I definitely believe in that, man.
Right. Well, it's very clearly just following the model of the magnet, right? The electromagnetic toroid that exists with every magnet is the sort of definition of the model, that model, and it applies to every living thing, every tree, every person, every planet, every sun, every galaxy has this sort of electromagnetic toroid that surrounds it. And the chakra idea is that at the core of that, at the trunk of that toroid, where you've got the maximum energy flow and the maximum twist, there's this sort of ladder, and the ladder has 7 rungs, and like there in the at least before we discovered the outer planets, there are 7 visible planets. And when the shaman goes and creates a center in order to tap into the energies of the world, there are 7 rungs. Or at the royal thrones of Europe, there are 7 stairs. And so it's this common thing.
Dude, that is like, that's what I mean. Like, that's crazy.
So that's just recognition of pattern and form.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And yeah.
Would you? So these are the if or questions, in my opinion. Coincidence or design? What do you think?
Right.
In the numerology.
Right. In that pattern of the 7s and so forth, and the history of the meaning of the numbers, I would say there's formal coherence. Looking the clay making carpenter god.
So
right.
Rewind just a little bit, because it cut out there for a sec.
Looking for, who made the order, like, is it intentional or is it not? It's kind of like getting stuck on the idea that everything was made by, like, either the clay potter or the carpenter, like, which is the Hebrew God idea, right? That, like, the maker, right? But that's an anthropomorphic.
But there is a maker.
Well, no, that's the anthropomorphic idea, is that there is a maker. It's like there must be, like, I only make things by being a human making them. So there must have been a human like thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so here's the other thing about the insistence on cause and effect, and you're right that our contemporary paradigm really does favor that idea that everything is a cause and effect kind of chain link process. And so if you spend time with Jerry and you spend time with his Marshall McLuhan studies, and you just spend time reading Marshall McLuhan, it becomes really kind of clear that tendency is a bias, if you might say, or it's what it is. It's a projection of text culture, book culture. It starts with the writing of the phonetic alphabet of the Greeks, but it really comes into full force with the printing of the book and the printing press. And that printing press idea of cause and effect dominated until the late 19th century. And then the electric circuit came around and things like simultaneity started to happen. And people like McLuhan, took a Gestalt figure ground view of things. And they started to notice, no, the effects precede the causes. Boom. Right?
Yeah, man.
So like a good example of that would be, for instance, like the automobile could only really come around after the bicycle had proliferated and everyone was riding a bike, because then you had all these people that knew how to use the instruments and make metal and be mechanics for metal. And you also had the creation, because they were using wheels, you had the creation and maintenance of flat surfaces, without which a wheel is pointless,
Right.
So that's that idea that effects precede causes. And we're obsessed with this in our view of history. And so all mainstream history is based on this cause and effect stuff. And not only that, it's based on not what can be inferred, but what can only be in evidence,
yes,
in the written record, right?
Yes.
And so there's this dominant.
Go back and experience it. We can only read it.
We can only, yeah, and so they say if somebody in the past has written it down, and then the dominant model is reinforced, and any challenge to the dominant model is tossed by the wayside.
With the exception of the artifacts, right? Like the spearhead that we find and things like that. Right?
Sure. But then the thing is, there's no feedback loop for all of those aberrant objects to then get thrown together.
Recreating what this arrowhead did.
Not just that, but you'd have to go to the top of department heads at the dominant universities that have their grant funding from the dominant banks and corporations and get them to agree that what you're looking at has veracity. And they're not going to do that because their paycheck is contingent on them agreeing that, nope, this old model still holds and we're not reconsidering it.
There's a quote. Have you heard of this guy, Simon Prentice? I'm name dropping right now.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah.
This book, it pretty much is just saying that, which McLuhan taught. It's very much in the vein of McLuhan, that everything is just a construction, right?
Yeah. Social constructs, right? Social constructs are dominant shapers of our culture. That's true.
Like the way that I live is completely artificial to my nature.
That's funny. That's a kind of solipsistic thing to say, insofar as isn't the nature of man to be artificial? I mean, language and having opposable thumbs means that we're artificers, right? So they talk about second nature, which is the second nature is the nature.
Around here. This is good though. I need this, right? Because it's like, yeah, of course, you're right.
And I hope we're not just doing this to confirm my rightness.
No, but I mean, like there is something to explore here. Oh,
yeah.
There's a little one in the background there.
Oh,
but
she endorses it.
Yeah, she's like, this is hurting me. I mean, like the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Socrates or Plato's allegory of the cave.
Uh-huh.
These ancient tales of coming out of
ignorance.
Exactly.
Or unawareness.
Unawareness. And the thing is that it, to many ways, it's like when the prisoner goes back to try and bring people, they're like, no way. And it really does come down to what are we prepared to do?
Right.
And I think that's a big message perhaps for society that it's still learning, is that, for example, being woke and stuff, it's like, I have to wake up. I can't go around waking other people up. For example, I have to come to my own understanding. I can't expect others to come to my understanding. Because
that's a challenge of our day, isn't it? Because the internet tends to drive away the idea of your individuality. It's retribalizing us and corporatizing us into a mass mind, and the exocognition, where we don't even have to have our own memories, because all we have to do is just type something into the computer and it's going to tell us what we wanted to remember, or it'll change what we wanted to remember and we won't know it. It takes the responsibility away from us. So onboarding personal responsibility and also personal discernment to decide for yourself and to say, I'm willing not to believe anything here, and just I'll accept the uncertainty. That's something that modern people have a lot of difficulty with.
Yeah. Well, and I think that in order to function in our creation, is that we do have to make ad hoc decisions here sometimes. Like, for example, those guys, I don't want to be associated to those guys. I mean,
well, right. Oh my God. Yeah. Guilt by association is huge, right? Yeah. And especially when everything's networked, because you can see who someone knows, and it's like, you accept that person, like this whole Dave Chappelle thing. It's like, I find it hard to believe that anyone protesting the Dave Chappelle special has actually watched all 6 of them.
Well, and to their entirety. If you watch the closer to the
conclusion,
end, you see that he's not against people who identify a certain way. He's against the madness of mobs. And he talks about that friend that he has who was a transgender woman and who killed herself. And he says she was killed by the negativity, right, of this culture.
He's really careful not to say that they did it, because he doesn't want to attribute blame without knowledge. And so he says, I don't know what was going on in her life, but at the very least, 6 days of that abuse from the world did not help when she killed herself.
Yeah.
And
I was having this conversation, and I know that this is controversial here, and I appreciate you correcting me, because again, it really is just my understanding. So what I try to say is I'll accept, the world, we need to accept each other and understand each other. And if I misunderstand, I am open to being told. Anyways, this idea of whose responsibility is it to be understood? So, somebody can feel a certain way, identify a certain way, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But it's still your responsibility to accept who you are. And sometimes when we do certain things or act in certain ways, like, for example, augmentation. So some people get a certain augmentation on, say, their nose, right? Because they want to look better with a certain nose. A year after that day, they sometimes feel just the way that they did before the operation as they do a year and a day after. So that really comes down to responsibility and acceptance of the self. And I think that sometimes in our social media societies, we try to negate that of self-responsibility and self-acceptance. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, for sure. No, I think it's true. I think, the Buddha was right that life is suffering and life is hard. And for whatever pains we suffer at any moment in life, we can misdiagnose what's causing that. And it's very easy to do that. When I was young, I looked at this thing and I was like, oh, the reason those people don't like me or the girls aren't into me is because I've got this terribly big nose. I better get a nose job. I mean, thank God I didn't, because that's the stupidest, most superficial thing ever. I mean, no offense to anyone who got his nose job. Maybe it worked for you, but but for me, I realized, like, that's not it, man. That's missing the point.
That's there for a reason.
Yeah. Or or whatever your karma is, a healthy way to look at it is that this is what is given to you, and this is what your challenge is, and you'll be better by going through it than around it.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's the challenge for each individual, to sort of to suffer their plight and their lot and sort of determine what fights are worth fighting for, what you can change, what you can't, and all that. But let's see, you mentioned something there about, before we got into Dave and trans, and I wanted to say that if in terms of this idea of history and the commitment to cause and effect, that I think there's a better way of looking at history, and it gives one a lot more flexibility, and also ideally more prescience in terms of anticipating what's coming next.
Right.
And it's not about cause and effect, because then you have to look for every ripple coming from every direction in order to see where the wave is going. But and then you have to look in all directions in the past to see, where things are coming from. But history, it seems to me to proceed more along thematic lines, right? And so some themes diminish and other themes raise up, and you can kind of intuit them by looking at the whole pattern at any one time. And that explains, by looking that way, you can sort of anticipate black swans a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah.
When things come out of the blue and that wasn't supposed to happen, and you get whole shifts in the ground as opposed to the figure. If you're looking at the cause and effect, you're only looking at figure on top of the ground. You're not noticing and anticipating when the ground can shift.
Yeah.
And let's see. So in terms of theme, like in terms of theme, last time when we were talking, we touched briefly on sort of our memories of 9/11 and the trauma that happened. And for me, the trauma related to the Cold War traumas and you learning new lessons. And the themes of the last 20 years were really sort of progressions on that initial theme established during 9/11.
Right.
Whether it was the mass shootings and anything else, like all of that stuff was it was terror-based stuff.
Yes.
It was like, how much can people be terrorized, and how much can the institutions
Into paralysis.
Total paralysis. Yeah, exactly. Like security,
existential paralysis.
Security to the point of catatonia, right? Oh,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, just this idea of, with that paralysis, that feeling of like, I'm numb, I'm completely powerless to this. We have allowed the walls to envelop us. We've allowed ourselves to be, we've freely become prisoners.
We've been domesticated.
Yes.
Our wilderness is gone. We have no access to our wilderness anymore. Resonant interval is shrunk. The resonant interval is shrunk down to hardly any movement at all.
Over a span of how long? Over a span of how long have we created these artificial, like
those themes were there early, like in 75, you could look at the headlines and all those themes were there. Terrorism and global climate change. They had different words for it then. Corruption and politics and whatever else. But to so I watched The Closer. I loved The Closer. I enjoyed it so much. I thought, what a good conclusion. And he says at the end, I'm putting a cap on this conversation. This is the end. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm not going to keep beating this dead horse. And so I started watching the first ones again, and his bird revelation is amazing, because he talks about why he disappeared for those 12 years and why he walked away from all that money in very subtle ways. And then for whatever reason, the algorithm knew what I needed next. And it showed me, George Carlin's 1999 special called "You Are All Diseased." Go back and watch this thing, man, because it's a historic artifact. And at the very least, it'll remind you of where we were then and how things are different now. Even if you decide that is distasteful and I don't want to think that way or whatever.
Oh, hell no, I'll watch it.
Yeah. it's because he has a whole thing about germs, and boy, does it relate to like global lockdown and all this crazy ass shit that's going on.
Like the sickest places to me are hospitals.
That's right.
Fuck. That's, pardon my language, but man,
Oh, I know.
this is revelatory. I mean, we've created our own, like the sterilization, the mental imprisonment. I mean, you know, I went to school for so many years. Somebody said it, that you go to school for so many years just to get uneducated. Like
Yeah,
you
right.
have to deprogram yourself.
Yeah. What did
I
you
mean,
study?
History. I became, you know, oddly enough, I became a mental health worker, right? A counselor. And my job is just to try and understand other people. But the
That's great.
interesting thing is that through doing that, I'm understanding myself,
Totally.
right? Through, like, I work with children, and in working with kids, they've like, yes, I'm the teacher, but so are they. Like
Yeah.
a good teacher realizes that his students are teachers as well. Like,
Yeah, a good teacher is someone who's always learning.
exactly. Like there is obviously, you know, you have to control your group, right?
You're a
But
shepherd, right?
yeah, you're a shepherd. I mean, have you ever heard of, is it Joseph Adlerian principles?
No, but
Okay.
quick review.
He was an educator. I mean, really, if we want to understand ourselves, we need to understand the education of youth. And there's such a taboo about understanding children, but like, I think that's a doorway into our understanding. I think that's what makes me good at what I do, you know, if allow me to embellish myself.
Yeah,
But
totally.
is that I can step in, like I've made peace with my inner child, I think,
Yeah.
right? So I can kind of understand the world through their lenses. When I take a step back and think about what I do, I'm like, man, this is crazy. I get paid to be a kid.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That is
Anyways.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I mean, you know, you can always, anyways, I get paid to be a kid. So where was I going with this? If we want to
Adlerian.
understand ourselves, we need to understand how we educate people. And Adler was all about giving people intrinsic social responsibility. It wasn't about rewarding them for good behavior. It was about like, hey, that was, you know, like you even avoid statements like, hey, great job. It's just, it's meant to, you know, finding out what you're passionate about or whatever.
Yeah, all that reward stuff is like commodification of behavior.
Exactly.
And the whole,
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the whole new model of what this technocratic dystopia is it's all based on Skinner. It's all based on behaviorism. All the new teaching algorithms that are done in ed tech, all of the what is it? Social investing? No, what do they call that? Anyway, yeah, it's not seeking to imbue the individual with some kind of inherent natural integrity, like what in the Enlightenment, I think that, you know, it was like self-evident truths. It's the erasure of those things.
I was gonna say something to that, so I was writing it down, and it was, you talked about Skinner, and Skinner was trying to understand the nature of animals, right? If I'm correct, like he's trying to understand the nature of things. However, the problem with Skinner's behavioralism is that it was artificial. It was an artificial understanding because he was controlling the environment. He wasn't studying things based on my understanding. I could be totally wrong here. He wasn't understanding things in their environment. He was understanding them in a laboratory.
Exactly. That's right. And so what's interesting, in order to see what the outcomes or the products of Skinner are, all you have to do is look at the advent of his children. Apparently at least one of them killed himself, maybe both of them killed himself. One of them ran into a university lecture hall, I don't know where it was, either Stanford or MIT or something, wherever he was, completely naked, like completely like manic, like telling them all they were doing it wrong. Like you create insane people when you use behaviorism. It doesn't give them any credit for any internal divinity or anything like that. It takes away their free will. That was something that I kind of like responded to when you talked about Sapolsky. I went and looked at some of Sapolsky's lectures, and when you look at things like that, it's just, granted, he's a less rigid determinist, because he's like, well, we can't really know all the things. There's so much going on there, but he's still a materialist and a determinist. It's about the way you doing judicial stuff in court. How do you decide, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to leaving that to God, so to speak, and thinking about simple discernment. Like, is this poison or is this nutrition? Which is a different kind of judgment, but it's one that everyone needs to learn, and everyone needs to let go of everyone else's sort of moralistic judgment.
Like, really, how do we know anything?
Yeah, it's best to have humility on all that stuff. Say, well, for me, this is as far as I've gotten. Maybe it'll help you, but
that's that. Okay, here's a value judgment. Jerry would be pissed, but that's kind of the problem, is that you have people who are the figureheads of whatever tribe they're in. Let's just say Ben Shapiro. Sorry, but I'm going to use him as an example.
It's okay. Yeah, I only know a little bit about him.
Well, he's very like reactive, but he's super popular. And I mean, therein lies the age-old question that should we be mad at what media is, or should we be mad at ourselves for consuming it? Right. Yeah.
Well, there's a certain character that gets that's seductive in the media world. Like, in any, you can find it on the pulpit, and you can find it at the bar, and you can find it at the lecture hall, and you can find it on the radio. And it's
getting high.
Right. And when you're getting high on somebody else's certainty, then you feel the same sense of certainty. So it sort of, it guards against your own fears and your own uncertainties. And so, if Howard Stern says it, it must be true. Right. And it's the same kind of thing. Like, this is the thing that, so from a young age, I've found it compelling to think in terms of the world behind the curtain. Right. And so the common euphemism or pejorative name for that is conspiracy theorist. And so, like, I've kind of always had that name thrust on me, which is annoying. I like to think of myself as an espionage phenomenologist.
Yeah.
Right. But in that
accurate title, actually, an espionage phenomenology. I mean,
thank you. It leaves it open.
The answer is in there, right? Espionage, like this idea that a governmental body is doing this body of something.
Yes, something is happening. Something is happening. And phenomenology is just what is possible, right? That it answers the question, what is possible. It doesn't require you to say what was done. How do you know?
With certainty. This is it.
Exactly. So who cares?
CIA is behind everything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Who cares?
It's behind a lot.
Who did what? Well, yeah, sure. But who cares who did what or why? All we want to do is try to point to the phenomena and say, no, this is happening. Something is going on. It doesn't really matter who's behind it because the theme sucks. But so the reason I brought that up was because along the lines of Ben Shapiro or Howard Stern, it's like I find Rush Limbaugh and Alex Jones indistinguishable because it's emotionally the same content.
It's the same currency.
It's the same currency. And if anything, Alex Jones has done more to hurt the pursuit of looking behind the curtain than anybody else, because he's so blustery and because he empowers people who haven't thought about something for very long to believe they know what it is, And
I think another one about Alex Jones is that it's just downright mean-spirited. Do you know what I mean? Like, there really is something there in... Like, you watch a movie and you're like, this could be a good message, but it's just so mean.
Yeah.
There is, you can tell the truth while taking into consideration how you tell the truth.
The tone, that's true. It's also important to distinguish content from tone, but yes, in general, like, totally. I mean, it ends up being like WWF, right? It's like, and people they love that shit. They eat it up.
Well, it's funny you mentioned WWF, WWE, but like let's just take, for example, professional sports. I'm sorry, but for all those people who are like, WWE, it's so fake. Well, yes, it is, but so are the sports that we watch, man.
I know.
You don't think that this makes a good story? Why, why are there salary caps? What? like it's just all of it. You're like, come on, like you do this to keep us entertained. It's breads and circuses all over again. It's just
Totally.
a different hit.
Reinforcing tribal identity, arbitrary associations. One of my earliest memories, like 5 or 6 years old in the neighborhood, like kids, the older kids who all watch sports and love sports, like all arguing over or fronting on which of their sneakers was better, Adidas or Nike. And I was like, there's no difference. What's the matter with you people?
Yeah, they're shoes.
Who cares?
They're coverings for your feet, so your feet don't get cut up.
But to have a preference based not on your feeling of being in that shoe, but the symbol on it. Like, what the hell is that about?
But hold on. How old were you when you? Because like, let's be real, that's not usual.
No, it's not. But the main reason probably is because
we all get caught up in our bullshit. Like if it wasn't that, it's PlayStation or Xbox. You know what
right,
I mean? Like
right.
There's these things that we get stuck on. Like, but then when you start to pull back in, like, okay, there's this book. Again, Jerry's gonna be pissed, but I'm gonna look this up while we're talking.
Yeah.
The Madness of Crowds.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard of that one?
No, but I mean, I have heard the title. Yeah.
Yeah. The Madness of Crowds: Gender, Race, and Identity. I don't know, but that's like, whoa, that's a faux pas title for 2019.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Academy. Yeah. The Academy has been taken over by a certain disposition. Andrew Sullivan has a few great articles on his blog recently talking about this, because he's speaking about it from a gay man's perspective. He's like, gay rights were built on the idea of tolerance. We only would have had the chance to say what we had to say and to prove the rightness of our position in terms of tolerance because we had the academic environment that celebrated difference, where you could argue, and that the person who made the cogent argument in opposition to the dominant dogma or the dominant belief structure could speak. And now everything's getting shut down, and it's just silliness. I mean, I think actually what's going on there is that the universities are demonstrating to anyone with a head on their shoulders that there's absolutely no reason to pay them to go to university any longer.
Dude, okay. But then you got to get your credits, right? You got to get your MA of blah, blah, blah.
That's if you want to participate in their system. But like the thing is,
yeah, man.
right? Like
great point. But again, you have to make a living, right?
You do. And so thinking outside the currency, when we're getting into a monolithic currency and it's going to go digital, that's a big question, is like, how can you trade on value and have currency in some way that isn't based on that, based on what Monsanto tells you is valuable? Because that's what it is.
But really, like, and there is the, I think that our nature, perhaps, when we talk about what's innate and what's invented, but what is innate is our ability to survive.
Right.
So anyway, whatever's going to happen, I'm going to make sure I'm putting food on the table for my family, and then I'm putting some away, right? But that's also what gets me stuck to the pension or not pension, but just having steady income, the JOB.
Yeah,
right.
That's
and
right.
now we're seeing so many people leaving the workforce.
Well, yeah,
what does that say?
Well, I think that's related to the fact that there's the sort of monolithic tech hegemony, right? Amazon wanting to control the entire retail market, and fused with the federal government. I mean, the thing is, Amazon is the perfected Soviet system. It's the Soviet system where you don't have to wait online; it comes right to your house.
Right, because it's not nationalized anymore. Like it's jumped the buck kind of thing. It's not United States, it's not Canada, it's not Mexico, it's Amazon. If that makes sense.
Well, right, and that's right. The corporate digital fiefdoms have been established, right?
Apple.
And so all of them want to maintain. They not only want to have their monopolies, they want to be the only monopolies, and they want to be the only markets, and they want to drive out middle class and lower class. They want a small business, medium-sized business. They feel there's no reason to have those whatsoever. And so that's what sort of the COVID lockdown
Polyopoly.
responses. Yeah, like that's where all of this is moving to. And so this idea of people leaving their jobs en masse because, you know, either take the jab or lose your job is totally aligned with what big tech wants and what those monopolies want. And so they're like, so, you know, you talked about you can rely on people to, you know, the first impulse is to survive. Well, that can be gamed. Mm-hmm. If we know that you're going to survive under any cost, that means we know that you'll endure anything we throw at you. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, you know, I want to.
We are in a Skinner trap.
Yeah, you know, who is it? Albert Camus. Albert Camus said the only real question of philosophy that matters is whether or not to kill yourself.
And man, I love living. Well,
true. Yeah.
It's this other thing that, like, dude, I love being alive. I love listening to music. I love reading books. I love hanging out. The
feeling of being alive too, right? Because you can be alive and not feel it.
Yeah, but when I die, somebody's going to be saying, like, at the wake, like, dude, his liver is shot, but that man lived anyways.
Yeah.
Because like, that's the way, like, I wake up and you got to make lemonade. You know what I mean?
I do.
That's the choice. I was going to say something else. I apologize.
It's okay.
Totally slipped me.
See if you can think of it. Whatever you say, you'll be probably wrong.
That's very true. Oh, yes. Have you seen the movie? It's called Thank You for Listening. I think it's like about this guy. He's black and his name is Cassius Green.
Yes, I did see it.
Okay. That was an amazing film, I thought.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting film. It was like
what that says to what's happening.
It was humor in the age when humor was already on the rails. It also happens to be, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know this with any intimate detail, but, you know, Armie Hammer's in it, and in it, Armie Hammer plays the sort of the evil white dude who's animating everything.
Yeah.
The re-enslavement of humanity.
He's the man.
The man.
But here's the key thing. He's like, I'm not your. There's a line in there. He says to him as he's talking to Cassius Green, "I'm not your boss. I'm your friend." And that line is like, that's what it is. Like, you know, okay, dude, there's this other book. It's called Diversity Inc. Have you heard of it?
Nope.
Pamela Newkirk. Amazing book. It's saying that she looks at three things. She looks at academics, Hollywood, and corporations, and how they've responded to racial equity and all that, right?
All the social justice stuff.
Yes. All the social, gender identity equity, something like that. Anyways, yeah. I'm getting it wrong, but you're right. And she says that of the three, which one do you think scores the highest?
So scores in what sense?
Scores in how they're doing in terms of gender equity, racial equity.
Oh, I see. I mean, the military is probably doing the best, right?
Well, here's the three. So there's Hollywood, academics, and corporations such as Amazon, Coca-Cola, you know, those commercial corporations.
Right.
So
I don't know. I mean,
corporations.
Whose record keeping can you trust?
That's a good. Well, she supports the argument pretty well, but
yeah,
corporations, and then it makes me think. Well, why would corporations try and score the highest? And it's because I think they know where it's all going. You know, it's performative versus it's like paper bags, right? Like I go to the store and if I don't bring my bags, they're like, do you need bags? Yeah, I do. Well, it's 5 cents for every bag. So they're doing good about using plastic.
Right.
It's performative, but they're still profiting off of.
Of course. Yeah.
People will only do what's right if it, you know, people in power or whatever. This is a general statement, but anyways, corporations will only do what's right when it profits them. Like it's all about the bottom line.
Right. That's right. And that's their modus operandi. That's their reason for being. That's their legal obligation to their shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. I want to like, so that thing about Armie Hammer that's interesting is, to play that role, he had a good sense of humor. Similar to the role he played in Free Fire, which was a Scorsese produced and Amy Jump and Ben Wheatley directed and written thing that was fun. Great sense of humor. Yeah. And Armie Hammer kind of carries it. He's sort of like the Winklevoss with a good sense of humor, right? He laughs at himself. And the thing is, his name is Armie Hammer because he's from the Arm & Hammer baking soda family. He's not just some guy that made it in acting. And dude, ever since that movie, you haven't heard a peep out of him. His family was like, bitch, you're not working anymore. You're giving it away too fast. But so watch that movie again, and you remember what the conclusion of that movie is. And anyone who hasn't seen it, go rent that movie. It's a funny movie. It's thought-provoking. It's this dystopian science fiction through advertising lens.
Yeah.
And check out that movie, and then see if you can search for the U.S. Army Medical, AM, Research and Development, RD Command.
And that movie's called Sorry to Bother You.
Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, look up.
So U.S. AM, Army Medical, RD, Research and Development Command, C, and then look for horse blanket. One word horse blanket.
USAMRD Command C horse blanket?
Yeah, RDC, like where C is command.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Research and Development Command.
I see. Horse blanket. Champion horse blankets.
No.
I mean, it's probably since like.
No, it's a declassified document. Horse blanket. I can send it to you later on. It's a graphic of the U.S. Army's Medical Command COVID response. It was published on May 20th, 2020. So just like 2 months and 5 days after the Ides of March shutdown. And it's how they're going to respond. Yeah, it happened on the Ides of March. Yeah. And so like within 2 months, they had this thing that they could release. It was going to be their whole response. And their whole response goes back to the Remdesivir or whatever solution, which is, of course, a patented solution, which costs something like $2,000 or $4,000 for a course. And it's not like the $1 a hit ivermectin or the other thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so no mentions of those things. And so you get a sense for like what their plan is, and what's going to be permissible in the response, in the government response. But the thing is, it's a graphic image. It's a 4-page poster, and it's called Horse Blanket. And the image on the top sheet is sort of layers of atmosphere over the Earth. And then you have the globe of the Earth, and each layer of atmosphere has a different a different aspect of the responses. So I forget what the first one up is, but the second one is like data collection. Right. And so, but it's like, you have to imagine it's like, Palantir level data collection. It's like all the data collection we don't have access to. And then above that, one layer is this department, USMARDC. And then above that, it's like actual solutions, like treatments, like diagnosis and treatments. So that's outside of this Army envelope. And then there's 2 arrows coming in from either side. And one of them is collaborators, which is like corporations, media, universities. On the other one, it's mechanisms. And each of them is this arrow going through the ionosphere, sort of targeting in. And then underneath the whole thing, there's 3 layers. This is so fucked. Underneath, there's 3 layers. And the bottom layer is national security, which we all know is a term that has no definition. The second one is DOD, and we know borders, the Pentagon. And then the next one above that is threat standoff. And then between threat standoff and that ionosphere is all the people of the earth. And what is a horse blanket? It's the thing you put on before you saddle the horse. So you have to kind of wonder what the hell's going on.
What?
And
well, Amazon dude, Amazon, I can't even imagine how much money they've made since March of 2020. Was it 20? Yeah, it's 2020.
March
March
2020.
2020. How much money they've made until March of 2021.
Yeah, the shift of power, the shift of
you
wealth.
would have to actually see before too, right?
Right, but no, but if you look at, I think it's like if you look at the main, what are they, like Fang, Microsoft, all of those guys. If you acknowledge, I think the wealth transfer in their direction was $5 trillion in the first year, and the amount of wealth that was lost in the middle class and everyone else also amounted to $5 trillion. So it was just like bam, bam.
But isn't that our fault for being consumers? Do you know what I mean?
No, not at all. Yeah. So okay, that's a great question. I don't want to be dismissive of that, because that is the thing that animates everyone's sort of ecological concern behavior too, right? The whole don't fly on planes because the amount of carbon that you create is, and you take that personal responsibility. I mean, let's be real. There are dominant institutions with huge investments in intellectual property that control what is possible for profit. And lots of us are invested in it. All of our 401ks are invested in that. And so we're technically invested in that way. But the thing is, they're at the top making the decisions.
Right.
We do not bear any responsibility for it. They can change these things on a whim and decrease toxicity in the environment on a whim, maybe at a loss, but ultimately, whatever is good for humanity is not their concern.
No, of course not.
And the idea,
back to the plastic bags.
Right, exactly. So all of that is penance. It's no different than the Church of the Middle Ages taking tribute.
You're right.
That's all it is.
God damn.
And I'm not saying go create the world more, right? I'm not saying make the world more toxic, make the world less toxic. But that's the problem, toxicity. It's not carbon.
So what do we do?
Laugh. Live with yourself. That's the first thing. If you can't handle the stress of reading the news, don't read the news. But the thing is, it's, ideally, the more people take the effort to be awake to the situation, not to let their better interests and their good intentions get gamed. I mean, that's the hardest part. Everybody that shows up and tries to and wants to petition against Netflix for having Dave Chappelle, they're trying to do the right thing. They believe it's the right thing to do. So it's their intention to do the right thing that's been gamed against their better interest against everyone else's better interest.
I think that's a good point. I think actions oftentimes come down to certain behaviors, like behaviors that become destructive. There's the road to hell is paved in good intentions. This is so unjust. How could this happen? I get that, right? I can understand that. The other one is just impulsivity. When people do things, I can't think of when things become dangerous and destructive versus constructive is when it's you justified what you did. You rationalized it. Right. You rationalize it. And then the other one is just you're impulsive.
Yeah. So there's something, I think a certain amount of impulsivity and being in touch with your impulsive side is good, so that when you do all of a sudden have a breaking moment, you kind of know the territory, and you're not saying the stupid thing that's going to get you in trouble or hurting someone's feelings you don't mean to, or landing in jail because you strike the wrong police officer.
Well, here's one thing that when people say, oh, I hate cancel culture or whatever, it's well, hold on a sec. Going back to what I said about resilience is we just try to survive. So when you have this monolithic, construction or whatever it is, this force, which it's a force, man. The internet is a force. The crowds in internet chat things or whatever, they're a force and they hold weight. Anyways, when you find yourself up against this, you have to adapt to it. And so the reality is we do need to think before we speak, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, but therein lies another truth. Like there's something about our intuition as well. Like you know what I mean? Like what's your first gut answer versus think about it, censor yourself based on what the culture is telling you to censor or filter, and then say it.
Yeah, maybe. Self-censorship is certainly sort of necessary in life in general, because everyone has to negotiate their power relations in their life, and a certain level of impulsivity will prevent you from having any entrenched, any constant bridges if you're constantly burning bridges, right? So that kind of matters. People can have lives not online. You can erase your Facebook and still live, you know, and that might be a good thing to do. I was you asked what to do, and it's such a complex question. There's no single answer, I don't think, in terms of how to respond in a healthy way. Studying media studies is good. Studying McLuhan is good because if you can't diagnose a situation or observe a phenomena, then you can't respond constructively to it. So if you don't kind of take the time to see what the television is doing to you, then you're letting the television run roughshod over you and shape who you are. And that in itself is a problem. I had a funny conversation with a relative of mine recently. We were talking about the January 6th thing, incidentally. And there is a composite video that somebody put out from all of the individual videos that were taken on cell phones surrounding in the sort of moment building up to the quote unquote murder of Ashley Babbitt, right? And most of everything about that event in fact, everything about that event comes at you through a screen, whether it's CNN or anything else. All the conversations about it are through a screen. Even if you're looking at the composite of all of those videos coming through a screen. And I was fascinated by the way that my relative looked at that video, and what he saw was completely different than what I saw. And I was like, this is fascinating. This says more about the enigma or the paradox of art. And he countered with me, and reality. And I was like, oh, no. If it's on a screen, if it's a video on a screen, it is not reality, it is art.
So what did you say? Like, what was your takeaway from it, and what was his? Because they were different. If you don't mind sharing.
No, that's okay. It's going to sound absurd unless you've looked at the video and unless you're comfortable with the idea that there are dominant institutions within government that are concerned with shaping public opinion, and so put on theater and create civic events that are inauthentic. Okay, so if you're comfortable with that, then it won't sound so crazy. But if you think that those things are absurdities, then it'll sound absolutely nuts. I look at this video and I see absolutely no evidence to conclude that a person named Ashley Babbitt, who's identified in the video as Ashley Babbitt, is dead. And that might sound horribly insensitive to the people that are like identify with her death or believe that our nation's capital and its institutions were really under threat that day, and their identity with the state and the state religion is challenged. I don't really give a damn. But I look at that video and I'm like, it doesn't look like there's a dead person there. It looks like everyone's acting in strange pantomime and kabuki theater, and it's no wonder that it's kind of hard to find this video, because.
So you think it's totally staged?
I look at this video as
I haven't seen it. I honestly
right. So if you God, we're putting this on the YT.
Well, it's not out yet. It's
okay, no. Even when it does, it's funny to be saying this because they've censored this off of their platform. You can find it on BitChute, I think. But if you look up the, it's what's the guy's name? He goes by. Shit, I forget. it's like Booze News or Dues News or
some fringe news thing though.
it's totally no, it's not even real news. It's some guy who decided that he was going to composite these videos and put commentary on top of it. And he's actually a really
guy
good
with a big beard.
He never shows his face.
Okay.
He's just a video editor, and he's like, this is nonsense. Like, this is like one of these staged false flags, like a lot of the mass shootings appeared to have been. And here I'm going to put all the videos that I've compiled from various sources from this event and create a continuous stream, right? Because all the rest of them are like these little minute clip, 2-minute clip, but he takes all of them together and then jumps between them all so that you get a continuous sense of the action. And you're like, oh, this is the closest thing to this full event that we've seen. And it's his snarky conversation over the top of it that really is going to push people who are uncomfortable with the idea away from accepting it as having any veracity or even watching it with any tolerance. But like, you know, as a designer and a media studies amateur, like armchair student of film, I look at the object of the film and say, you know, where might there be special effects? Where are the, you know, all of this stuff, and say, what's the intention of the filmmaker? And I ask all of those questions. And to me, I look at this and I'm like, no, Ashley Babbitt's not dead. And so, but you know, it raises the questions. Well, what's the social facility of her death? And then you can start to say, oh, martyrdom. But it demonizes. It helps to create this idea of the domestic terrorist, which is absurd. It's a transfer of the Islamic terrorist, which was also absurd.
Okay. Yeah. See, here's where it's like, whoa, I see why this is touchy.
Yeah, it's touchy.
And I'll be honest, we probably disagree, but respectfully, because I like, you know, mass shootings and stuff is those definitely like happen. Because I know this girl, I don't know.
Oh no. So here's the important thing is not to lump them all together. There's no doubt there's authentic mass shootings that happen. Of course, people go crazy.
But they make it seem like it happens all the time.
Well, no, but they do happen all the time, but a lot of them may be instigated for profit, because the organizations that are there to protect us need their budgets, and if there's no mass shootings, they don't get their budgets.
Hey, how do you make people buy firearms?
How?
You know? Well, you just
to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Well, it goes both ways, because for sure, for the people who don't, for the victims of neoliberalism in the Midwest, the people that Hillary called deplorables, they all feel like the people on the coasts with their federalizing government are coming after them. And so, yes, they're going to get guns and say, well, when the mass shooting happens in my town, I'm going to have my gun and I'm going to be able to stop it. And then everybody else who doesn't want a gun on the coast, who believes that anyone having a gun except for the cops means that nobody dies by gun, they want all the guns to go away.
Can I interject for a sec? Sorry. Well, I think it's like this. It's like, how do you control people? You create a disease and then you give them the cure.
That's right. Yeah. So that's in action. I mean, the funny thing is that if you look at emergent weapons technology, guns are kind of obsolete now. Yeah, you can still kill someone with them, but like in terms of federal power, military power, like using guns and incendiary devices, that's all like just for profit. Just keep the thing churning, right?
Yeah.
The real power exists in invisible weaponry. You know, like directed energy weapons, where you can control behavior and mass crowd control, and all the invisible stuff. You can, hypothetically, you can have a medical system that can, turn on and off your genes in order to make you sick when you're not being a good person.
Isn't that kind of what MLK Ultra really was just experiment?
No, MK Ultra, not MLK Ultra. Sorry.
Oh shit.
It's a good name for a book, though.
I'm such an idiot. Anyways, MK Ultra.
MK Ultra, yeah.
Sorry about that.
So no, MK
Not,
Ultra is about
not Martin Luther King Ultra.
no, oh, no,
And,
yeah.
and what did the MK stand for in that?
What is that? It's mind control,
Get out.
spelled the German way.
Holy dude, that is it.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
No, that's it. And that's the thing. It's MK Ultra.
Is YouTube gonna take this down? Like this is
Oh,
too mind blowing.
yeah, we're gonna have all of those words that they like to censor, and so we'll see. Let's put it up and see how long it lasts.
But I don't think that this is offensive.
It doesn't matter. Their algorithm doesn't give a damn. And if someone flags it, it's even less important to them what's actually said. We could be promoting everyone's lockstep thinking and using these terms, and they would still take it down. It's indiscriminate.
This is insane, dude. Well, we could always pitch it to Netflix because I mean they seem to be going against the grain.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's all It's like they're playing the role of being the progressives right now, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think that like honestly, life is momentous, and we can just keep going on building up momentum.
Mm-hmm.
But once there's pushback, it really does slow it down. And I think that with the closer that was a push against this avalanche that seemed to be going on in terms of cancel culture. It really does seem like it was.
I hope so.
Pushback. Well, because they didn't take it down.
No, I know that. And Chappelle's at the point of his career too, where he could be like, "I'll walk away for another 12 years. I don't give a damn. I don't owe you anything," right? Whereas most people are kind of like, "I really need to keep the gravy train coming, or just to keep the bread on the table." And so the idea of canceling most people is to destroy their economic viability entirely. It's like weird. It's like living death. It's worse than death.
I'm so sorry that I keep cutting you off, Matt, but here's the other one is that like, you know how we have these motivational speakers and it's like they're kind of touching on something. So Bernie Brown, who Jerry talks about, constantly keep the secrets, but constantly reveal them or something like that. Some quote.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Great quote. Anyways, Bernie Brown talks about having enough, right? And just monumentally successful, like Oprah level successful.
Oh right.
It's so interesting, talking about enough, and it's like, where do we stop? But anyways, it sounds like Dave Chappelle has mastered that. I've known when is enough, and I think that might be one of the levels yet for us to realize. Talking about that video you showed, the other room waiting. Is when to have enough in our materialistic culture.
Yeah, I mean the other part of that is the sort of mentality of abundance instead of scarcity, right? I kind of hate the rhetoric and the philosophy of the secret, but like there's definitely something to be said for mind over matter, and when you project the sense that you have enough, people treat you like you have enough, and eventually it might balance out. I mean, not for everybody, but power of mind is real.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if where's that book again? You got to check this book out because he talks about like, imagine if we just didn't talk, how much different the world would be. That like through speech, we have gone on to create everything. We created the spoken word. I mean, what did we used to do to entertain ourselves? We would tell Beowulf,
right,
things to that effect,
or the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah. When do we stop? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
mankind has got to know its limitations.
No,
but can it?
Well, no, it can't, because think about look backwards at any backward period in time that we have a framework for, and put yourself back then and be like, was there any way in hell in that environment that they could have anticipated what the world became? No. Liu Kang, the architect, Liu Kang. Oh yeah, right. Or there's another thing about the static.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll probably get into the other.
Edward Gibbon. I know. I'm sorry. Edward Gibbon. He talked about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and one of the big reasons why the Roman Empire fell was because they stopped being a conquering army and they became a holding army or a static army, as you said. Right. And that's when it started to. So you're right. If we stop, then it will implode on us. We have to keep moving forward.
Well, certainly our monetary system is built that way so that growth is built into it. And there's no such thing as homeostasis, and there's no such thing as, and so that's probably a problem with our system. But that's all second nature. That's not fundamental to life or reality. It's secondary. It's a sociological effect. The question, what would we be without language? It's an imponderable kind of. It's like
that's a good point. Yeah.
But I am like a hugely, if you haven't spent time, and I've only just recently in the last couple of years started doing this after hanging out and listening to Jerry and participating in TED Threads for a long time. I finally got around to reading Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man, and the Gutenberg Galaxy, and what's it called? The Eric Havelock's Preface to Plato. That all of these things are like great benchmarks to start from. And I'm curious about the other book that you mentioned, but since that's your interest in language and so forth, these are like really you almost can't think about what the 21st century could become or what humanity is capable of until you grapple with these things. And I say that having tried to think about these things for a long time. I think a whole new door opens up when you get into McLuhan and thinking about the ways in which the different media affect our consciousness.
Well, I got that book, so I'm going to crack it. And the next time we get together will be November 22nd.
Cool. 11/22.
Hey, that was great. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. This has been a lot of fun again.
Any last words?
Yeah, I'll quote McLuhan real fast since we're on it. There was this one thing that he says a couple of times. Oh, damn! I'm not gonna be able to find it. What else could I say? Here's one to close up with, given everything we've talked about. What's the difference between a tourist and a terrorist?
Dude, I think they're the same.
The terrorists are trying to annoy you.
Amazing.